Hello everyone. It seems that people should somehow come to the understanding that life is endless and the soul is eternal. There is no need to be afraid of death, especially for those who have a pure soul. Of course, we are all people and we have all committed sins and made mistakes on the path of life, but without this there is no development. The most important thing is to recognize these mistakes and understand them. And if they cannot be corrected, then we must repent of them and never commit them again. There are no sinless people on earth, we fall and rise. That is life, and the main thing is not the number of sins and mistakes, but the main thing is understanding them and repentance.
My dear Daddy left this world 4 months ago. In 1 second. It was a blood clot. He was only 62 years old. He was so athletic and completely healthy. He didn't smoke, didn't use drugs. But what was amazing, apparently the soul already knows that it's time to leave, because my dad met his best friend the day before, spent the whole day with his brothers, completed the paperwork in a week. He had lived in the house for about 15 years before that, without having documents for this house that would allow him to sell it, began recording a lot of songs on his channel, playing the guitar. He also told me, "Oh, daughter, why am I doing all this? Now I listen to these songs all the time." His voice is there. He was so cheerful at work on Friday, and early on Saturday morning he was found in the house. 1 second. No chance. I asked him to come in my dreams. And on the 9th day he appeared in my dream. He came with an unfamiliar woman. He was so smart and young, his eyes were smiling and he was so happy. In my dream I knew that he had died. I asked, "Daddy, aren't you scared there?" But I didn't dare talk about it, because he was so happy and so inspired. How he glowed from the inside. And they communicated with me with their thoughts. I was completely conscious in my dream, I understood everything. Maybe I moved somewhere to them. I don't even know. I asked the woman, "Who is she?" And she answered, "I am not your relative, I am just lying next to your dad," and she sends me the image of a monument. She said, "You will be able to find me, the dates on my monument will be like your birthday." I woke up so happy, probably my dad and I were still communicated, but my mind can't process everything. There was a feeling that I just hugged him, and my soul was so good. In the morning I went and lit candles for that woman. I imagined her and thanked her. And on the 40th day I came to my dad and found this woman 3 graves from my dad. And the dates matched. She was born on the 18th, my birthday, and died on the 18th. I told everyone about my dream and we were already going to look for her grave purposefully. When we found her, all the relatives' eyes almost fell out. And I told them, there is no death. All 40 days, and most importantly in the first days, I thanked God for my dad, for all the moments together. I mentally sent him love. I tried not to cry. I thanked God 100 times a day for the fact that I have my wonderful dad in my life. I hope I helped my daddy.
My husband came to my daughter in a dream on the 40th day after his death and said, "Tell your mother not to be afraid, it is not scary here, here you rise higher and higher." After that I stopped being afraid of everything, including death.
Exactly 2 weeks before my son died, I stopped eating. I didn't want to eat and I couldn't. I slept only an hour a day. I couldn't understand anything, and then it happened.
My husband died 12 years ago. And for the last year he kept saying, "I'm going to die," and then what we should do after he died. He died at work. They were trampling snow with a swamp vehicle, making a road. At first they sent another person to this area, then suddenly they changed their minds and sent my husband. As he was leaving, he said, "Well, guys, I'm going to drown." The road went through a swamp, there was a washout and he went under the ice with the equipment. According to the safety regulations, the door was open. The temperature was 36 below zero, so the soul knew that its physical body would die.
I want to share my experience. I died about 15 times different deaths and remained alive. I want to say that the death does not depend on how a person lives. We already come here with a return ticket. People have noticed this for hundreds of years. That is why there is a proverb, who is destined to be hanged will not drown. If you came here with a return train ticket, then you would definitely not fly by plane. The only thing that can be changed is the lifespan. This is definitely true. Each person has a life graph on which there are points when the probability of death is 100%, but this does not mean that a person should die at this point. Those who want to live, are engaged in development, love the world, people, and thank the Creator, leave only at the last point. And then you can always ask, and if you lived according to your conscience, they can extend your lifespan to the required term.
On the 40th day we were commemorating Grandma at Grandpa's house. When everyone left, only the closest people remained. My son, he was 2 years old then, blew out the icon lamp. It was 6 o'clock in the evening. He came running and said, "That's all." We thought he meant that the day of remembrance was over. They say that children can see souls. And a few minutes later something happens. We were in the kitchen of an ordinary apartment. It was already very cold outside and we did not know that you need to keep the windows or doors slightly open on commemoration on 40 days so that the soul could leave. We heard the sound of broken glass. We all ran into the room. And we saw that the balcony door has a huge hole in the middle. Words could not describe our feelings. As we were told later, the soul could not find a way out of the house.
40 days after my father's funeral, he came in a dream to my mother and said, "Take away the wreaths, they have crushed my entire chest." The cemetery was far from us and it was not possible to fulfill my father's request quickly. So he was coming to my mother in a dream 3 times until the wreaths were completely removed.
I lived in another country. I saw in a dream, men from my previous job came and said that they had just come from my father's funeral. I woke up all in sweat. I thought that I needed to get a new passport urgently, otherwise I couldn't come to the funeral if it happened. I went and submitted all the documents for a new passport. They gave it to me in a month, and 2 weeks later my father really died. I went to the funeral without any problems.
I'll tell you another story, also about my uncle. 10 days had already passed after he was buried. And at night in my sleep I heard a crash. I didn't understand at first. I run to my grandmother, and she was already almost completely blue, and then another alive uncle shoves water and pills at her. I said, "None of this will help her. Just open all the doors all the way to the gates." It was a private house on the ground, and I was living with my grandmother at the time, and give me holy water and a church candle. My uncle ran out of fear. He did everything and gave me what I asked for. I lit up a candle and brought it to my grandmother. After a while she began to breathe and I sprinkled her with holy water 3 times. And I walked around the whole house until the candle stopped sparkling. It appeared that my grandmother saw the deceased uncle through the window. He stopped and looked at her, and left. So during that period when my grandmother was feeling bad, she had a dream about her uncle dragging her to the cemetery, and she fought with him. And another thing that surprised me, I was about 11 years old then. How could I knew about this candle, water, that all the gates had to be opened? I don't know to this day. But it came to mind somehow at that moment.
On June 1, 2019, my son hanged himself. We buried him on June 3. According to our custom, the next day after the funeral, relatives bring breakfast to the deceased to the cemetery. When we came to the cemetery and had a snack as it is proper, we talked, of course, about him, my son. And suddenly I felt that someone tenderly hugged me from behind my back and my arms and pressed me to himself. I cried in surprise and everyone turned towards me. I said that Oliver came to say goodbye and everyone was shocked. It was summer, I was wearing a t-shirt. And in fact the place where he hugged me was covered with small pimples. That lasted for about 3 minutes. When we came home after the cemetery, the elder son laid down and closed his eyes. Suddenly he heard the loud voice of his deceased brother, "Don't tell me about death." Now I have no doubt that there is no death. There is a transformation from one state to another.
It happened twice that I changed the location of the car at the last minute. In 2004, I worked as a taxi driver. It was at night. First, I stopped at a traffic light in the far left lane. The second in line, there was a truck in front of me. Then I thought, why am I standing after the track if the lane next to me is free? As soon as I changed lanes, a car crashed into the truck in front at full speed and went under the truck up to the windshield. If I had stayed where I was, I would have stayed between them. And the outcome was clear. The second time, I was driving with a friend. I was driving. She was next to me. We were standing first at the intersection. We needed to turn left. Then I said, "I'll back up a little while there's no one behind me." And as soon as I drove away, a car just flew past on the right, not fitting into the turn at great speed, flipped over and flew over the curb into the trees, exactly where we were standing before. My friend then was recovered for 3 days from nervous shock. She was shaking terribly. After all, she would have taken the brunt of the blow first, but I would have gotten it too. There was no option. What made me move in the last moments, I can't explain. I only know one thing. I've been driving for 30 years and have never been in an accident. And I drive a lot. I've driven a taxi and traveled half of the country on business trips. Probably, someone always drives with me, my guardian angel.
In summer my husband and I went on holiday to the seaside. Our daughter and granddaughter arrived, and my husband decided to run with her in the evening. On an uneven paved area. When he tripped and fell, it seemed the whole hotel heard the sound of the fall. I meant that he hit himself hard and bruised his knee. He couldn't walk for 3 days. I prayed and didn't know what to do with him. There were no first aid stations or pharmacies nearby, though my husband thought it was nothing serious. And he endured it. But I'm basically talking about something else. His silver chain with a cross turned jet black in the morning. And not only in color, but also there was the impression of a good rusty coating of black dust. I was very scared. I saw this for the first time. A week later everything more or less passed. My husband was able to drive a car. And we left. One day my husband said, "Look. The chain becomes light again." I thought he didn't notice it at the seaside. But I didn't tell him not to scare him. I wonder if the chain turned black from pain. From a misfortune. That could have led to disability. Or did it take away and neutralize the disease in this way?
I would like to tell a story about my mother. 38 years ago, my mother's father died. She was sitting next to him all night, and only in the morning she decided to go lie down in her room, and instantly fell asleep. She dreamed of her late mother, whom she no longer remembered. She died when she was only 3 years old. In the arms her deceased mom kept a small baby, and next her brother was standing, also deceased. In the dream, she immediately realized that this was her mother, and she was very happy to see her. She told how they went to the cemetery with her sister, but never found her grave. The inscription was in Arabic. Her mother answered, "I know, you passed by several times." Then, in the dream, she remembered about her father, and said, "Mom, Dad passed away today." In response she heard, "And we just came for him." When she woke up, my mom told about the dream to her family, and was surprised to hear that the baby in her mother's arms was her sister, who had died as a baby. Mom didn't know about it, because no one never told her.
3 years ago I buried my mother. She was elderly, but at 86 she retained a clear mind and excellent memory. And so, sitting in a chair and concentrating on gazing into the void, she said, "There is Mom, her mother, who died 50 years ago, standing and looking at me, and she has a halo above her head. She is a saint, she has come for me. I must say that my grandmother was the kindest soul, she did no harm to anyone, and she could share the latest. A few days later my mum passed away. It was 1997. I saw my dad in a dream, who died a year ago. Dad was cheerful, in a new long grey coat, he boasted to me about the new thing, and he was so happy. The next day I went to visit my mum, who lived in another part of the city. We didn't have cell phones at that time, so we exchanged news when meeting. My mum told me that a day earlier, they installed a monument on my dad's grave. It was grey from marble chips. Then I understood what Dad wanted to tell me in the dream.
There are many mysterious and inexplicable things happening around. Some people just don't pay attention to it. But if you've ever encountered something unusual, you can share it with us in the comments. That's all for today. Subscribe to the channel, leave your comment or a story and activate the notification bell not to miss our new videos. Bye bye.